Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Life Conversations with a Twist. I am very honored to have Emily on the podcast. I actually kind of was let me just put some context to this. I listen to Keisha, which is, I probably listen to like 5 podcasts. She's one of them. She's one of my like weekly like ones that I listen to. And you actually went through one of her courses and you were on her podcast. And I remember like listening to your episode, like, oh, this is so cool. Like, I just loved your conversation and what you're doing in your business. And then we're in this like group podcast thing and you and I were like connecting and I like didn't put it all together. So I'm just excited to have you here. Like, I feel like you're like this famous person that's been on Keisha's show.
Oh my gosh, Heather, thank you so much for having me. I am definitely not that cool, so I appreciate it, but I'm just a normal person just like you.
I love that. But I just remember like listening to it and I was like, oh, this is so cool. And I just love your story. And she's gets to interview with Keisha. Like, how fun. I would just even love to be in a conversation with her. So,
Oh my gosh, she is just such a joy and the energy that she brings to a room. Like a lot of the story that I hope to share with you today kind of originates from my experience working with her and learning from her, and kind of looking at this year a little bit differently. So I'm excited to chat with you.
I love it. Okay, so let's take you back to little Emily. So, like, tell us a little bit about more like day to day. Where do you live? Family life? What does your world look like right now?
Yeah, so I am originally from upstate New York, and I earlier this year moved from New York to Florida for my husband's job. We were there for about 7 months, and then we came back to New York. So I currently live in the capital, Albany, New York region. And it's me, my husband, and our little fur baby right now. So the three of us get to hang out and kind of build a new community here, which I turned 36 in a couple weeks. And let me tell you, building and making friends as an adult is super hard. So I am in the throes of like, hey, who wants to be my friend? How do you meet people? And so kind of building my business, building my community here, and I'm also trying to build a family at the same time. So staying busy, that's for sure.
I love that. There's a group here locally where I live where that's what she does is she brings women together and she does like different like fun little events like bunko and entrepreneur kind of mixers and things like that. But
Oh, cool.
she built this community for someone like you who might not have a lot of friends, not have a huge network, whether they've moved here or whatnot. I've been blessed because I'm like still living in the same town I was born in, and so I literally know everybody, so I don't know what that's like.
Nice.
But sometimes you just gotta like find your people in your community because again, like we're gonna talk through some of the things that what you're working on, what you just started, and I think community is everything.
Yeah, it's so true. And I have been really lucky where in this area, there's a lot of networking, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that get together and do things. So I like to tell people that, well, I used to say that I'm in my do it scared season, but I think I'm in my like just do it scared all the time because I am just realizing that in order to kind of like put yourself out there and meet people or do something or see the result that you want, whatever that could be, you have to just do it scared and there's never going to be this perfect time. So I'm like, you know what, I'm going to go to that networking event by myself and I'm going to stick it out and meet people. And I've been pretty fortunate where I've had the chance to like meet some incredible people. And I'm like, okay, got to join a gym so I can maybe like make some friends there, or like do you meet people in the grocery store, to be determined, haven't tried that one yet. But all the things that I'm just like, you know what, like life is too short to take things too seriously, so I'm just gonna try it and hope for the best.
I love that. Okay, so you just started your own business, and before we started recording, you and I were kind of like chatting about how this conversation was going to go, and we're like literally in the same boat. We both have a podcast, and we both started our own service-based business within the last year. So talk a little bit about where this idea came from, kind of maybe your career background and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I am the founder of the ServicePreneur Network, and I work with service-based business owners. So entrepreneurs that have built an incredible business around their knowledge, their skill sets, their expertise. So unlike a product-based business, you are selling a service where somebody is paying their time or paying for your time and what you can offer to them. And so I got the idea to really step out onto my own after spending like 12 years in corporate marketing. I joke and say that I like got to the top of the corporate ladder. I looked around and I was like, this can't be it for me. And I always just felt drawn to like having a bigger impact and being able to have my skill set go further. And I would come home every day and kind of be frustrated with leadership or not being able to use my skill set to its fullest. And I think you can only come home so many times from work angry until your husband is like, why don't you just start your own business already? And so he kind of really put the confidence in me and gave me the push that like, yeah, it's time. Like if I'm going to do it, we were still starting to build our family at the time or try to. And I really was just like, you know, if I'm going to do it, I got to take the risk now.
Mhm.
And I'm so grateful that I did, Heather, because I wake up happier every day. I wake up and my feet hit the ground and I think about the clients that I get to serve and I get to serve them in the fullest capacity that I can with my skill sets and really help them build successful businesses. So I basically took all of my years in corporate marketing and translated that into working one-on-one with servicepreneurs, which is the phrase that I coined for working with service-based business owners, to really help them fine-tune who they are, what they do, and articulate that in a way that's going to help them get the right clients that they need to grow their business. But the thing that I'm even more excited about is I just launched an online community where I can bring early servicepreneurs, so the people who are just starting out on their entrepreneurial journey, and they're great at what they do, but they don't necessarily know how to build their brand or do marketing for themselves. And so a lot of times what you see is there's these super expensive mastermind programs or hiring an agency or a coach. And when you're just getting started, like you don't have the money to do that. And so I built this community for $67 a month where somebody can come in, they can learn from me, they can learn from each other, they can get on podcasts, they can do brand collaborations and really feel like they're putting the right foundations in place to grow their business. And I just get to help even more people, which is what fills my cup up the most and keeps me excited, but also on my toes a little bit too, because every day is different.
Oh my God, I can like so relate. I have so many thoughts that I jotted down. Um, I can totally relate to the like, let's finally like go out on our own because that's the same boat that I was in. And I was just saying to someone the other day, because I'm in this like boat of if somebody has an idea, they're thinking about wanting to go out on their own and they kind of don't know what to do and but they're scared to leave their job. I'm like, literally is the best thing I've ever done in my life. I'm like, I have so
Yep.
much flexibility. I can take a day off if I need to. I can go pick my kids up from school. I get to hand pick my clients. It's like one of those things that I'm like, I would never go back.
Yeah, it's so true because I think one of the things that most entrepreneurs like about working for themselves is that flexibility and freedom. And you don't get that when you're like constantly, you know, on Slack and having to make sure that you're checking in with the boss or whatever it might be. And I agree, like the fact that it can be a Tuesday afternoon and I can decide that I want to like drive home to see my little nephews and spend time with them on Halloween in the middle of the week, and I don't have to stress about who I'm not talking to during the day, or I can create my own schedule. Like you're so true. It's a different like beast almost for sure. But if anybody is listening to this and like has the itch to kind of take that leap, like I agree with you. Do it. It's
I'm not
worth
gonna
it.
lie. It is hard. Like
Oh, for
all
sure.
the things. Like, oh, what kind of business should you apply for? Your taxes, insurance, social media. I think that the hardest thing for me this last year was exactly what you said, which I'm like, cannot wait to have this conversation with you. And I definitely want to check out your network. Is like I know what I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm seen for, but like putting that into my brand or like what I want to sell has been the hardest thing. And like over this
Yeah.
last year, I've taken on clients that like might not be a good fit for me or something that I was like passionate about, but I knew it was something that I was good at, but I'm like, it wasn't something that like was like the driving force of my business. And so this year has been very much all over the place of like trying to identify like what it is I want to do.
Yeah. Well, it's such a fun part when you're getting started to kind of think about like what is my brand identity and who do I want to be and what are the services that I want to be offering? And then you think about like okay, all of these things to outsource cost money, right? And like there are definitely aspects of it where it's like you need to hire a lawyer or work with someone to build your client contracts to protect your business, right? You need somebody to help you with your finances. And what I have always found is marketing is the one that most people are like, oh, I'm going to keep that one. I can figure it out, right? Because when you're looking at money differently, you have to be strategic with how you're using it. And so I kind of just got to this point where I got fed up with people being like, raise your prices and only think about high value clients. And then you've got to like that just equates to somebody who can spend a lot of money. Let's be honest here. Like that's all that means. And there's this entire group of people who are like, well, I need and deserve the same access to information and guidance and support, but I can't drop thousands of dollars on marketing. And so kind of to what you shared, like the vision for me creating this community was for me to create something where people could feel heard, understood, supported, and basically get the blueprint of like, this is your business model. We only talk about this business model. So every piece of advice you're going to get for myself and other members is going to be valuable for your business. And it takes that pressure off without having this like anxiety or pit in your stomach of like swiping your credit card for money that like you don't necessarily want to spend. And here it's a lower price point to make it affordable so that you get access to expert guidance just like everybody else should too. And that's kind of my like mission and driving force behind what I have kind of built so far and am trying to grow now.
I love that. I definitely need to check it out because I think it's so funny because so many people that I've been meeting, they're all like consultants or coaches. I mean, everyone I feel like in my life is in this bubble right now. And what I feel like a lot of us are struggling with is like you were saying, people are paying us for our time. We set like a dollar amount per our time, but then like it's one of those things that it's not like, okay, you're paying me to do a website, I'm going to do a website and I'm going to hand it to you and it's done. But like a lot of consultants, it's like there's not really like a physical thing that you're giving them, right? And so it's hard to
Yeah.
justify to them like one, your value, and two, like they could come back and be like, oh well, I didn't get what you proposed, but it's so hard to justify that because it's a weird world. That is probably one of the things
Yeah.
that I've struggled with this year for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then I have been in many, and I see a lot of the same themes where people that are charging thousands of dollars are offering the same advice that I would give somebody for a much lower price, or maybe not the right advice for their business, or they're not even getting exposure because they're one of many in a mastermind or a group program, or they're paying into a maybe a done for you service that you buy into, and it doesn't necessarily translate to the goals that you have. And so to kind of have something that's like a still a community oriented, you know, network, but with that one-on-one access through calls and free coaching with me and different things that I offer, like my whole thing was I just want people to feel seen, heard, understood, and supported. And if you can get that through calls with me where like the goal is I'm going to teach you something and then you're going to go and implement it in your business, and then you're going to come to my office hours next week and tell me the progress you've made and share your screen, and ideally launch things faster. It's just the online space is really confusing and overwhelming at times, especially when you're just getting started. So to be able to kind of have that like confidence and clarity, I think is really important when you're finding the thing that's the right fit for you.
What does your membership like look like just for anybody out there that might be interested in being a part of it?
Yeah, so it's kind of two sides to it. So one is like the evergreen where information is always there and available to you. So you come in, there's a podcast corner where you can go in and talk about your podcast. You can find guests on your podcast. You can pitch to be on other people's shows. There's a services section so you can actually sell and promote your services, get referrals for services that you need in your business as well. There's a resource area. So I'm constantly throwing templates and resources and checklists and downloads and all of these written tutorials for the person who is like, I prefer to read information. And then that's married with self-paced tutorials. So say you're coming in and you're like, I need to know if this is like what am I missing in my marketing strategy? Where there's a DIY strategy audit to walk you through the things to be like, nope, you're missing this. These are the foundations that you need from a marketing standpoint. Along with video tutorials on a whole bunch of things marketing and business wise too. So those are things that are there all the time.
Mhm.
And then every month we do live training and workshops. So we'll pick a topic and people can come in. They're going to learn from me where I'm walking you through the steps. Um, in the past, we've done things like the marketing foundations workshop. We've talked about how do you actually build your content strategy, because most people know I know I need to be posting reels or I need to be posting carousels. People know that. They want to know, well, what should I be putting in that content to make it convert for my clients? So we had an entire training on that. We did a lead magnet training to create freebies in your business to boost those email lists. So we have these live training sessions that then immediately get paired with office hours where you can come in and say, hey, I got stuck here, or I have questions here, or could you give me feedback on this live on the call? So I'm in there interacting with members. And then there's a live chat area too. So in between all of that, you can actually come in and say, hey, I'm working on this. A perfect example, I have a brand personality quiz that I created, and I jumped into the network and I was like, hey, will somebody test this to make sure that my automations were set up properly? I had a couple people do it. I saw their emails came in. I said, perfect, this is working how I need it to, because otherwise it's just me home alone working by myself. And then I pushed it live, and now I've got a way for me to attract potential people into the member, get some in real-time support from me and their members too. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop to help you learn, hold you accountable, get the support you need, but all of it is centered around like taking action and getting the blueprint to kind of put the right marketing strategies in place for your service-based business.
I love it. I am definitely want to check it out for sure. How does your podcast how long, I guess, like, what was the mind child behind the podcast? Who are your guests, and what can people learn if they were to listen in on you?
Yeah, so I actually, this is a little bit of a backstory before I answer your question. So I had a completely different podcast last year.
Huh?
I was interested in podcasting, and it was right about the time when I decided to kind of go off on my own, and I had no idea what I was doing. And I wanted to just have conversations about pivotal moments that people were experiencing, because I was going through this pivotal moment of like leaving corporate and starting my business. And then when I joined Keisha's mastermind in February of this year, one of the first conversations was, you got to change your podcast, right? And she was absolutely right. For somebody who might not be familiar, her mastermind was, how do you leverage your podcast as a driver in your business? And so as I was kind of in the throes of really fine tuning who I wanted to be working with from a client standpoint, to kind of creating this network concept in my business, because up until that point, I was only doing one-on-one marketing consulting and coaching with clients. We were trying to be thinking about the podcast as an entry point in, and how I could use that to not only build my brand credibility, because I wanted people to know like, hey, she knows what she's talking about from a marketing standpoint, and two, create a wider funnel for people to get introduced to me, to learn about all the offers that I have, and then ideally funnel them into working with me. And so the Servicepreneur podcast, which is the name of my new podcast, that kind of was a way for me to say my business is the Servicepreneur Network. I want to have some consistency. I was also in the process, I still am, fingers crossed, of trademarking Servicepreneur. And so for me, it was a natural fit for me to introduce this podcast where I could really lean into helping that early servicepreneur who's in that 0 to 5 years of business to give them free advice. And basically, the premise of my podcast is you can come in, listen to an episode, get really tactical advice, turn around, implement it in your business, and start seeing results. And so I like to share a lot about marketing and branding and content. I love bringing people on to kind of share their zone of genius, all under the guise of if you have a service-based business, whether it's marketing, personal development, operations, business, strategy, finance, legal, all the things. The goal is you could come in, get what you need, and get out, because time is money and we don't have enough time and we all need more money. So the goal is to kind of teach you and ideally get great information that you can immediately use in your business.
I love that. The Zone of Genius, where are you reading Take the Leap, or
No, what is that?
I think it's called Take the Leap.
I
Something
do
with
need
a
a new
leap.
book.
It
Is
is a
that what they
book,
talk about?
and he talks about the zone of genius as like the top of the zone, but there's like three other zones before, and we all kind of like live in a zone, but you need to get to the zone of genius to like be happy and flourish and do this thing. I'm only like two chapters in, but I'll send you the link.
Oh yeah, I love that.
It's actually been really cool to read. But it was just funny because I literally just read that Zone of Genius yesterday. That's why I was
Oh
like,
my gosh,
oh.
that's so funny. I have not, but I am in need of a new book, so that sounds great. I love
Okay,
it.
I'll send it to you for sure. I love what you're doing. I think it's so needed. I'm in that like weird stage too. Like Keisha would just eat me alive because my business has absolutely nothing to do with my podcast. But my podcast started first. My podcast is what I love. I've always wanted to have this space for women to come and share their story, to be inspired and empower other women to either share their story or know that they're not in it alone. And we're gonna get into your little twist in your journey, but has nothing to do with my business
You
whatsoever.
know what? I don't think it always has to be, right? Like
Yeah,
I have even thought I'd love to resurrect my old podcast and bring it back just from like a pure fulfillment and passion perspective. And who knows, like you and I are having this conversation and I'm sitting here like you need to be on my podcast and introduce you to my community because there's so much value that you could provide. So um I love talking about podcasting, and I am actually working with a couple of clients to launch podcasts right now, which is really fun for me being a year into this. And this little idea that I had has now turned into a moneymaker for me. But I do think that there doesn't have to be like this strict box of what your podcast can be. If you're enjoying it, who knows where it could lead to down the road. So I wouldn't beat yourself up too
I
much
know.
about
I'm
that.
not. I'm not. But it's when I talk to people about both, they're like, you like you automatically light up when you talk about your podcast. Like that to you is something that is so important in your life. And like, not that my business is not, but my business is paying the bills. The podcast is
Mm,
not, but the podcast is my passion. So it's like,
yeah.
how do I change that perspective and make the podcast actually make me money? So we'll get there someday.
I got a lot of ideas for you, and I can never turn my brain off, so we can talk.
Okay, that's good. I know. That's how I am. I'm like, I meet with someone and they're like, I had this idea to do this business. And I'm like, I'm like,
Are
here's a
you
marketing plan.
are you
Here's a
a
business plan.
projector? Have you done your human design? Are you a projector?
I am a manifesting generator.
Okay. So similar. I am a projector where I'm like, all I want to do is give people advice and ideas. And I always am like, Emily, take a breath. Like, make sure they want to receive all the ideas first. And I'm like, I just can't help it. I'm like that, like little puppy dog who just like wants to like jump on you. I feel like that's how I get in business with ideas and just wanting to like see other people just kill it in their business and just give them all the things that they could ever think about to help them get there.
I'm so that way. But I want to be like I want to be like the idea generator, but I don't want to be the doer. Like I just want to like tell you what I think you should do and then I want you to go do it.
Yep,
And then you
yep.
give me the money, and then you pay me for that advice. No, I just did this exercise with a friend the other day. So, but I'm totally. Do you do Enneagram? Do you like believe in Enneagram?
I have done it. I am a one wing two, which
Okay.
basically means I don't know enough about it. But basically means like I am stubborn, but I am also very compassionate and I want to help other people and like everything needs to feel just. Like every like follow the rules and like do
Mhm.
things fairly, I think is the description of it. I might have got that wrong. So
No,
if somebody's
I think
listening
you're.
is like, oh, she got that completely wrong. I think that's what I'm telling myself, and that's what I'm sticking with.
I'm a three, which I can never remember what it is, but I think it is. It's a achiever. I think it's achiever. Yes, I'm the achiever. So, which is
Okay.
totally makes sense. Like I'm constantly like, hey, what can I do? I have two businesses. Like I'm kind of crazy, right? But I wing a helper, which is like that helping and wanting to like help people through podcasting or
Okay.
whatever. And then my other wing is creativity, which is like where I get creative ideas. So,
Oh, cool. You're like the trifecta of all the good stuff.
I actually one of my guests this probably a couple weeks ago. Hers isn't live yet, but she that's what she does is business coaching through Enneagram.
Oh, that's
So like she
cool.
teaches you about your Enneagram and like how you can run a business or work with others through it. So
Oh, wow.
but I do want to learn human design. That's like my next thing.
Well, I'll connect you with somebody there.
Okay, okay, sounds good. So let's talk personal for a minute. And again, you can get as personal as you want. But one of the things that you talked about on Keisha's podcast was you were growing this business while you're trying to grow your family. Can you walk us through what that life has been like the past year?
Yeah. So, like I said, I just crossed over the year mark in my business. And so at the end of last year, I was like, 2024 is going to be my hustle season. It is going to be my year of execution. Like, I had this massive plan of like all the things I wanted to do, and I felt really great about it. I joined Keisha's mastermind in February, which just like, put gasoline on the fire in terms of my excitement and all these big ideas that I had, and I was ready. And then life hit me in the face. And a couple months into the year, we found out that we were pregnant for the first time after a long time of trying, but were immediately met with complications. I was in the hospital for like 2 months every single Friday because we had just moved to Florida and no doctor would see me as a new patient. So they were like, just keep going to the emergency room, which is not where you want to be ever, let alone every week. And so I would go and I would never get any answers. And they basically were just like, we need to keep waiting, come back. And the long story short is we ended up losing the pregnancy. And I went from like having this like aggressive business mindset of what the year was going to look like for me and everything that I was going to do. Basically, I ran into a wall and everything came to a standstill because I was uncertain as to, well, what's going to happen. Like, are we going to is this going to turn into a regular pregnancy? Are we going to get good news? Are we going to get bad news? And no news meant that like I didn't want to tell my family because this little thought in the back of my head was like, well, if this turns around, I could go home and do like a really fun reveal the next time that we flew home and I was showing. And like I had all of these like moments of optimism in between a lot of negativity. And so I went from kind of running really fast to just stopping and having to grieve and deal with the emotions and the loneliness of us being so far away from anyone in our family and all of the things on top of like I'm also a new entrepreneur and I'm trying to figure out how do I make money, but I didn't want to do anything. All I wanted to do was like sit on my couch and cry and be sad. And I had zero motivation. I didn't have any energy, which is like a recipe for disaster when you're trying to build a business, right? And so I went into this like status quo mode where I was like, what are the things that I'm going to have to do to keep my current clients happy and be okay with just status quo for a little while until I can kind of like get back to a place where like life felt okay again, you know?
Mhm. And what is your like where are you at in your fertility journey now?
Yeah. So we had to have the DNC procedure done. I had that done in July. And then at the end of August, we moved back to New York. And honestly, there's something to be said for, I know we talked a little bit about like having community and people around you. Knowing that I'm like 2 hours away from my family now has completely helped me, knowing that I've got my mom, right? Even though I'm, 36 soon, like there's just something of having family by. And so from a mindset perspective, like I struggled for a very long time. Like it did not really turn a corner for me until I moved back. And I think it was partially like, let's get out of the place where we had a lot of negativity. Like on top of that, we also the month before lost my fur baby, who was like my cat with me from my first job out of college. And so there was a lot of pain associated with where we were. And so I'm still grieving. Like there are days where like I wake up and I'm like, man, this sucks. And we're still going through, the fertility journey and, doing the testing and getting as much information as we can and making adjustments to our lifestyles if we have to, and kind of talking to doctors and all of that. But I think like where I'm at now is at this place of like finding myself again, which is so hard because when you're going through, and even if it's not something fertility related, right, even if it's something like you're struggling with something in general in your life, there's a little bit of like numbness and loss of identity that happens, and you kind of have to find yourself again. And I had to simultaneously try to find myself as Emily and then also find myself in my business. And I've been having like a lot of reflection time right now because I have had a hard year. It's been rough for me, but now I'm settling into like, well, this is going to be my new normal for a little bit as we kind of take the next stage and what that will look like to be determined from a family standpoint. But having to find my identity in my business and find that excitement. Like I'm very much at a place now, months later, that I'm like, okay, I have clarity in the business and I'm leaning into the clarity in the business of who I want to serve. And is that a safety mechanism a little bit? Probably. But it's helping me to like find that passion and that spark again, which will inevitably lead into like me as a person. So I would say like if there's somebody who's listening into this who is going through something like a fertility battle, like it never ends. Like I am very lucky that I now have great people to lean on and support me. I didn't, because I made the decision not to talk about it before. But it still, grief still pops its head up every so often. One of my best friends from high school got pregnant this year, and I live within distance of her to drive to her baby shower. And the night before, I sent her a message and I was like, I can't do it.
Mhm.
And I just was like, I can't do it. I said, I'd love to come see you, just the two of us, but I can't put myself in that situation just yet. I wasn't ready. Could I now? Maybe. I'm not really sure. And I don't have somebody else in my world that is pregnant, but I think where I'm at is still grieving, healing, but finding something that has allowed me to kind of focus on the positive and focus on forward motion and progress has been so helpful. And the change of scenery hasn't helped or hurt either. I'm a mountains girly, and we are in the Adirondack Mountain region now, so that doesn't hurt either.
I don't know. When you say New York, I think of like downtown New York. That's all in my head. Where I
Oh,
think,
we are mountains. Yeah.
okay,
So we
okay.
are upstate New York is like farms, mountains.
Oh,
Definitely you got to drive a car if you want to go to Target. No
clearly, I've
public
never been to New York.
transportation.
One thing you mentioned earlier was that you felt like starting a business and becoming an entrepreneur and dealing with fertilities issues, it's like you're on this deserted island all by yourself, and that there's not, even though like both of those like buckets, like so many people are in those buckets dealing with those things, but you do feel so alone. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, you're like, can I just have someone to talk to about? Which honestly is what really had sparked this, my podcast idea, because I'd had these conversations with women and they all varied in different topics, right? But I'm like, they were always like, oh, I felt like so alone, or I don't know anyone else. But I'm like, oh, I do. Like, I know so and so who went through the same thing, or I've gone, someone's been through the same exact thing. And like, I want to just like make these topics and these conversations just available for people, and then also to like not like hide in it, like not hide in your journey and not hide in the hard things, because honestly like those hard things is what makes you blossom and what makes you grow and what makes you explore other things. And so I want to like leave that there for people to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be okay.
Yeah. Oh gosh, you are so right. And everyone knows the societal pressure, right? Don't tell anybody that you're pregnant until the end of your first trimester because so many things can go wrong. And if you were to ask me a year, 2 years, 5 years ago, like, oh, are you going to tell anybody when you get pregnant? I'd be like, no, I'm going to wait until the first trimester is up. And then going through this experience where I'm like, absolutely not. Like, if we find out we're pregnant in the future, like, I'm going to need that support system more than I ever did before. And
Mhm.
it's something that was a lesson that I learned the hard way of not talking about it because you need to. And then when I started to talk about it, like, I told a bridesmaid in an Instagram DM what happened because nobody tells you how to handle it. Like,
Mhm.
how on surface level insensitive does that sound for something that is so life changing to me? But I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know how to bring it up. And I also felt this guilt of burdening someone
Mhm.
and putting that weight or sadness on their shoulders. And one of the things that I realized is that, like, no, your family, your friends, the people that are closest to you can hold space for you,
Mhm.
and they can be there for you just as much as they want to celebrate the ups, they can celebrate the downs too. And so regardless of the struggle that you're going through, you're 100% right that loneliness makes it 10 times worse. And if people are just like willing to talk about it, it could help more people than you could ever know. And I shared this with you before we got started. Like, I'm a pretty private person. And so I was like, there is absolutely no way that like I'm gonna share so much of my life. Like, I still even struggle to like show up on social media sometimes because I'm just like, what am I going to talk about? Nobody cares what I'm doing in my day to day. And I remember when I went on Keisha's podcast and I talked about it, it was like my entire world opened up. And it was an immediate inbox flood of people that were like, thank you so much for sharing your story. Like, I got a message from someone that was like, this is me, you are me, we are the same. Like, I'm struggling with this too. Thank you so much for being comfortable talking about it. And it was like a light bulb moment for me where I was like, okay, I helped one person. So as uncomfortable and scary as it was for me to go on and share quite literally the most personal part of my life with the world, it has done so much good. And I think it's helped me grieve, but it's also opened up so many doors to kind of go back to what you said about like the podcast and not having any relation to your business. Like, I was like, what in the world is me talking about fertility challenges and pregnancy loss have anything to do with business? And then I sat with that for a second and I was like, oh, it has everything to do with it because how I showed up in my business was radically different in the first, gosh, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months of the year. Like, I'm just now catching my stride, I think, in end of the year. And I found that through line of, okay, me talking about the softer side or the more emotional, vulnerable side of life, because as business owners, like life doesn't stop when we're working on our business and vice versa. And so it allowed me to kind of realize that you can bring your full self to your work. You can be vulnerable. You can share the hard things. And if anything, it's probably going to make you more relatable, more liked, more trusted. And like it has opened so many doors for me in terms of like meeting people like you that I never probably would have met otherwise, right?
Mhm.
Or connections to people that are like, I want to work with somebody like you
Mhm.
because I feel connected to you on a deeper level. So I do think that having conversations like this, and even with your podcast, like there is a through line to everything that we do. And I think like it just makes it less pressure. It feels like it's more pressure to have hard conversations, but if anything, like I feel like I'm back to the identity thing. I'm more true to myself now in sharing the hard things than I've ever been before, and weirdly like grateful for it, not for the circumstance but for the opportunity to like use that as a way to like use my voice and my platform and my way to kind of connect with more people on a way that I think more of us need help with.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah. I'm like, I have so many thoughts around everything that you just said.
I just get so excited, sorry.
No, it's good. Like just showing, like just being authentic. It's like, I mean, that's all you need to be. And
Yeah,
like there's no need to show up any other way. I also think that like I meet so many people and I'm like, will you be on my podcast? They're like, I don't have a story to tell. Like I haven't done anything cool or and I'm like, literally I can find a reason for every single woman in this world to be on this podcast because God, we all know that you've been through one thing hard and
yeah,
someone else in this world is going to go through it or is going through it and or will go through it. And if you're willing to like share how you were able to get through it and move on and be a better person behind it, like that is what I want. And it's just so funny to hear people go, I don't have any. I'm like, yes, I've had some very extreme like guests on my podcast for sure, like really crazy situations. But I'm like, but I've had just like normal I want to I would just say like everyday people who've gone through
yeah,
just your everyday life, fertility, changing jobs, getting fired, divorce, raising children, whatever it might be. Like this is all part of life
yeah.
and we need
Well,
to
and
talk about it more.
I so agree with you, and I think that there's sometimes this like shame associated with pivots or transitions. And I don't know if you see that in kind of the conversations that you have with people where maybe they go into it and they're just like, oh my gosh, I'm talking negatively to myself, or I'm not good enough, or they've got all of these like negative things that they're saying. And then like you recognize like no, the hardship that you went through actually makes you stronger and more resilient and makes it easier in you talking about it for the person going through it right now
Mhm.
to get through it too. Because to what you had said earlier about like life is lonely and like everything, you want to feel connected to people. Like if you sharing your story or pulling the curtain back on like something that's difficult is going to make it easier for somebody else, like I will do anything I can to make it easier so that nobody has to go through the things that I went through, right? Like I talk a lot about the silly little things that I had to do that were like, okay, I'm going to wear a hat today because I'm not going to take a shower, but I still have to show up for this call. And how can I make sure that I'm like prepared for it? Or how do I preserve my energy on these calls? Or, just things that seem silly and small, but somebody needs to hear that. And I think if like for this podcast is such a beautiful platform for people to like see themselves in your guest too.
Hmm. Totally. I unfortunately have not struggled with fertility. I have had a miscarriage, so I
I'm
can relate
sorry.
to that. And I honestly like sometimes forget that I went through that as well. I think I talked about it on one of the podcasts, and it was in between like my surrogacy and my son who's now 3.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but I do know a lot of people in my life who have been struggling with fertility. Like 100%. I can name like five off the top of my head who are like going through it now. I do want to just say that like there is an end to it. Like it might not happen right away, but I've seen some beautiful stories out of a really hard journey. So I just want you to know that like just take it day by day. Your time will come when it does, but it will come. And
Thank you.
however that shows up, whether it's your own or surrogacy or adopting or whatever the case may be, like it will happen
Thank you.
the way God intended it to happen.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. And, if you were to say that to me like 6 months ago, I would be
Yeah,
like, no
screw you.
way. Like, yeah, pretty
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
And I think, like, and again, I think that's just healing, right? And so, like, I am so grateful that, like, I can recognize, like, you need to work on your mindset. You need to tell yourself that you're going to get through this more. You're going to have to remind yourself that on the days where you feel like you can't do anything, and then you beat yourself up because you are this ambitious, driven, motivated, execution focused human, that just because what you're going through right now isn't a representation of who you believe to be true, it doesn't make that version of you disappear altogether,
Mhm.
and you'll eventually find your way back to it. And so I had to spend a lot of time to kind of get to the point where I can like agree with you right now, to be like, no, this is a circumstance and you will work through it, and it's going to be hard, but what is happening to you, but it doesn't define who you are. It doesn't change who you are. It doesn't make you any less credible in your business because you want to talk about it. It doesn't make you lazy because you have to kind of go down to the status quo in your business for a little while you focus on helping yourself. And I think that if somebody's in the throes of the darkness right now, like, and maybe they hear that and they're like, oh, it's never going to get better. It will. Promise you it will. It's just going to take time and time again of you telling yourself, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. I can get through this. Like, I joke when I painted my fingernails, I knew I was going to be okay. That was the self care moment for me of like, okay, I painted my fingernails. I'm going to be okay. And I just kept having to repeat that. And I'm not really one to be like the like manifestation type of girl, but I understand how it works now.
Mhm.
And it has been a game changer for me to kind of get to the point where like I can still sit in sadness in certain points, but I can also appreciate the sunshine and the positivity and the wins, I think, a little bit more than I could, beforehand.
I also think like hearing these stories as somebody who might not be like in it or dealing with it, it also like I just had this thought about being just self-aware of like how you show up in your day to day. And I'm going to say this because I kind of get emotional about it because I have three kids. I have a 3 year old who I started over. My son was 8 when he was born. It totally rocked my world. Like we knew we wanted to have him, but because I was like in this like total career space, it's been really hard for me to kind of like start over. And I
Mm,
find myself some days just like annoyed that like he won't go to sleep or he's screaming at me and he's being difficult. But then it's like this like moment, I just had this like aha moment that I need to appreciate this gift because not everyone gets to. And so it just is a reminder that like some of the things that we might not be going through, some things that we have, or things like the positive things in our lives that we need to be a little bit more have a little more gratitude toward them. So I just
yeah.
wanted like that was just a moment that I was like, because he wouldn't go to sleep last night, and I was like, you just want to go to sleep, and I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
why did I have another child? You know, love him to death, but you do like you go in these moments of like, oh my God, what did I do? Or this is so hard right now. But there's people out there that are dealing with more hard, and so
Yeah.
I think it's just
Well,
an
I think
acknowledgement.
it's different hard. Like, I wouldn't say that your heart is any different than my heart. It's just hard, right?
Different, yeah.
But I thought you were going to take that in a completely different direction when you started out, because I was like, oh, what are the things that I'm much more aware of people asking me questions about now that like I have gone through this? Like, a random stranger at a conference asked me like, if I had kids and I said no, and then they said, "Oh, are you going to have kids? Like, have kids before you get too old." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like, you don't know who I am." Or just like, how do you answer that question? Like, do you have kids? And I'm like, I don't. I still struggle with those questions. Or like, it's interesting how things can hit a little differently once you're kind of on the other side and you can see some of those things. But kind of to the other side of that, some of the things I'd love to kind of just share for somebody who's like, maybe you know somebody who's going through something difficult. The hardest thing for me was when people would ask me, "How are you doing?" And I hated that question because I'm not doing well. I'm angry one day, I'm sad the next second, like, and it made me feel guilty that I didn't have a better answer. And I am a really
Mm.
trying to recover people pleaser over here, but it just was like, well, I don't have a good answer for you, and I'm probably not going to have a good answer for you. And so if there's someone who is struggling with something, like, rephrase that question, and ask a different way. Or, hey, did you get outside today?
Mhm.
Right? Because sunshine can help you with your energy. Did you get outside? Did you go for a walk? Or, can I swing by and drop something off for you? Or phrase it in a way that is still going to kind of get a response from them. But that was, I think, the hardest point. And I got to a point where I was like, stop asking me.
Mhm.
I was like, I don't want that question. I don't want you to ask me it, because it makes me emotional, and then add a layer of guilt, and then a frustration because I'm not getting better yet. And it's going to take time. And I just would like downward spiral, honestly, Heather. And so
It's a
if
great
there's
reminder.
ways to just tweak that question, I think that might land a lot easier for somebody who, like, I know the point is you just want to tell me, hey, you're thinking about me and you love me. But the way that that lands with me is harder than the intention behind it?
I think that goes to anybody who's going through anything hard. Like, that is
Yeah.
such a great reminder of how we need to show up in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, I just think you're a doll. I love your story. I love what you're doing for us. Sir, I can never say entrepreneur. Like, it is like one of those words. Like, I could never have that in my business name because
It's funny you say that, because I stumble over it sometimes. And I actually have been thinking, and I might still do this, but I was like, every time I say it on my podcast, I record in Riverside, so it transcribes everything. And it's like service printer, service piner. And it never is where I'm like, I'm just going to do like a post where it's just like all of the misspelled ways that this word comes out, because it is a little bit of a tongue twister, I do have to admit. And I even get it wrong, so no worries.
okay, good. I'm like always like, okay, do I have to say this word? Yes, I do. But I love what you're doing for us because it is a very lonely world. And I definitely want to learn more about what you're doing in the network because I think it could benefit my life so much. But I'm so glad we connected. This is not like like goodbye. I feel like every time I have
Oh,
a
not
guest
at all.
on, I'm like they're like my new best friend, and I maybe whenever I come to New York, I would love to see you. But thank you for
Yes.
being here. Thank you for sharing your story. I know sometimes it's like hard to relive those feelings again, but again, if you can change one person's like mindset or mood for the day, it makes it all worth it.
Oh, Heather, thank you so much for having me. This was such a fun conversation. Like, I can't believe how fast the time went. It was
I
so
know.
great chatting with you.